I've never really felt at home in my own life, and yet standing in my father's mansion that day, it hit me how little of it I actually owned. Every polished floor, every marble staircase, every echoing hall whispered that this life belonged to someone else, him. His rules, his plans, his expectations. He didn't ask me what I wanted. He just told me. Study this, meet that girl, marry the other. All perfectly packaged, all perfectly lifeless. And it was suffocating. That final demand, marrying a girl he approved of, was the breaking point. It wasn't love I wanted. It was freedom. I had to do something unpredictable, something reckless enough to make him stop for a moment and realize I was not just a puppet. So I married her. She wasn't part of his world. She didn't carry his wealth, his influence, or his carefully curated image. She was herself. And she was 40, black-haired, graceful in a way that didn't try to impress anyone. Her presence alone unsettled me. Quiet, confident, self-possessed, and yet subtly vulnerable. There was a softness in her gaze that made me feel like an intruder in her calm, measured life, but also strangely grounded. I remember the courthouse that day. I was nervous, more than I'd admit. She stood across from me in a simple, elegant dress, and I noticed every detail, the way her hair caught the light, the gentle curve of her smile, the calm steadiness in her posture. When our hands met for the first time to sign the papers, I braced myself for awkwardness, judgment, or a polite distance. Instead, I felt warmth, steadiness, a quiet understanding that left me looking away first. It was unsettling. Walking out of that courthouse, the reality hit me. I had made a life-altering decision. It wasn't just a statement to my father anymore. It was a life I would have to navigate every day alongside her. And I had no idea how to do that. The apartment we moved into was modest compared to the mansion I'd grown up in, but it had a sense of peace I'd never known. She moved through it with ease, adjusting the curtains, placing objects just so, humming softly under her breath. I watched from the doorway, unsure how to exist in a life that felt so foreign, yet magnetic. At one point she caught me staring. Her smile was subtle, patient, almost knowing. It wasn't flirtation, not exactly. It wasn't anything I had expected. And that small smile, it made my chest tighten. That night I found myself sitting on the edge of our bed, tracing the furniture she had touched, smelling the faint scent of her shampoo lingering in the air. I was unsettled. I was confused. I had wanted to make a statement, to play a part. And now all I could feel was a strange pull, a connection I hadn't anticipated. For the first time, someone in my life wasn't trying to control me. And for the first time, I didn't want to leave. The first few days in our apartment were strange, quiet, unfamiliar. I kept expecting someone to burst through the door with a reminder that I was still the rich kid, still my father's son, still trapped in someone else's plan. But no one came. There was only her. And that quiet, almost imperceptible calm she carried everywhere she went. She moved around the apartment with ease, as if she had lived here forever, humming softly while placing books on the shelf or adjusting the curtains. There was a grace in her movement, a subtle elegance that made the space feel alive without trying. I found myself standing in the corner, watching, unsure whether I belonged here. Part of me wanted to retreat back to the life I knew, the comfort of wealth, the predictable routine, but something about watching her, the way her fingers lingered on the windowsill, the soft line of her jaw as she focused, kept me rooted. We barely spoke at first, just exchanged polite sentences over unpacked boxes or coffee. And yet, every time our hands brushed, accidentally on the table, or when reaching for the same object, I felt a jolt of awareness I couldn't ignore. I told myself it was nothing. It had to be nothing. But the warmth of her hand lingered in my mind long after it had withdrawn. At night, I would lie awake, listening to the soft creak of the apartment settling, hearing her move gently in the other room. She didn't make noise. She didn't try to fill the silence. And yet, her presence pressed close, like a gentle reminder that this was my new reality. I noticed the little details about her, the faint scent of her shampoo that seemed to hang in the air after she walked past, the way she smiled at small things, the careful way she placed her mug down without spilling a drop. It all felt human, grounded, and I was uncomfortably aware that I wanted to be part of it. Her gaze often caught me staring, and when it did, she gave me a small, almost knowing smile. It was neither flirtatious nor patronizing, just attentive. The kind of look that makes you aware you are being seen, not for your wealth, not for your rebellion, but for yourself. And I didn't know how to handle it. I found myself pacing the apartment sometimes, restless, trying to make sense of it all. My father's control, my reckless rebellion, and now, this quiet connection with a woman I had married for spite. I wanted to tell myself it was temporary, that I could return to my old life at any moment. But every time our eyes met across the room, every time her smile lingered in my mind, that idea slipped further away. And somewhere between folding clothes she had arranged and staring at her quietly humming in the kitchen, I realized something I didn't want to admit yet. Maybe, just maybe, this new life, this quiet rebellion, was starting to feel like home. I never thought small, accidental touches could feel like sparks. Yet there we were, a few days into living together, and every brush of our hands, over the sugar jar, reaching for the same towel, made my chest tighten in ways I wasn't ready to face. She noticed, of course, but never made a scene. She just let it happen, moving with ease and grace, her black hair falling softly across her shoulders as she gave a faint, almost amused smile. One evening, we were sitting on the couch, both pretending to read, but I was hyper-aware of her presence. Her knee brushed mine, and I froze, heart racing, feeling heat spread up my chest. She didn't move away. She just kept reading, flipping the pages with calm precision, and I couldn't stop watching her. The way the light from the window caught her hair, the subtle tilt of her head as she focused. I wanted to move closer, to let the contact linger, but I couldn't. There was a voice in my head reminding me this was wrong, too fast, too unusual, but my body ignored it. I wanted it. I wanted to feel her near, to hear her quiet breathing, to notice the warmth radiating from her skin. Later, as I walked past the kitchen, our hands brushed again. This time I lingered, my palm resting lightly over hers. Her fingers twitched ever so slightly, but she didn't pull away. My heart was hammering, but I couldn't move. I couldn't let go. It wasn't just physical. It was emotional. Every glance she gave me, every tiny smile, every quiet laugh made me painfully aware of how much I wanted to know her, to understand her, to be near her. She wasn't forcing herself into my life, and yet she was present in every corner, every shadow, every moment. That night, I lay awake in our modest apartment, replaying every touch, every glance. I couldn't admit it to myself yet, but something was changing. I was changing. What had started as a reckless act of defiance against my father's control was slowly becoming something I didn't want to escape from. And the more I resisted, the more aware I became of how deeply I was starting to care. It started with a quiet evening, the kind where the rain tapped gently against the windows and the apartment seemed smaller, warmer, somehow closer than it ever had before. She had made tea, and we were sitting across from each other at the small wooden table, steam curling between us. Her hands cradled her cup, fingers tracing the rim absent-mindedly. I noticed the lines around her eyes, the faint tremor in her lips as she spoke, and for the first time I saw the weight she carried, her past, her sacrifices, the life she had built entirely on her own. She started talking, softly at first, about her struggles, the long years of work, the moments of doubt, the quiet nights when no one was there but her own thoughts. I listened, entranced, feeling a strange pull of respect and empathy. And then she spoke about loss, subtle but profound, the kind of grief you carry without announcing it to the world. My chest tightened, and I had to look down, feeling a lump form in my throat. I hadn't realized how much my own life of privilege had sheltered me from real struggle until this moment. I wanted to say something comforting, something clever, but the words stuck. Instead, I took a deep breath and let a fragment of my own truth slip out. How trapped I had felt, how suffocating my father's expectations had been, how I'd always been a stranger to my own life. She didn't interrupt or judge. She just listened. Her eyes softened, her lips curved slightly, and for the first time, I felt the weight I'd carried alone start to lift, shared in a way that scared me with its intimacy. Then her hand rested on mine, Light, tentative, grounding. I froze, heart hammering, because it was not a gesture of flirtation, it was trust. And in that trust, I felt the stirrings of something more, something terrifying and exhilarating. I didn't want to let go. The warmth of her hand, the way her thumb brushed against mine, made the room feel alive. The rain outside became a gentle accompaniment to the storm of feelings inside me. We didn't speak after that, not really. We simply existed in the space between words, feeling the closeness that had grown in the past days. And yet, as I sat there, I realized that my heart had shifted in ways I hadn't anticipated. This wasn't about rebellion anymore. This wasn't about spite. It was about something real, fragile, and utterly unexpected. I glanced at her, her eyes distant yet kind, and I wanted to tell her how deeply I felt, but I was afraid. Afraid that speaking it aloud would shatter the delicate balance between us. Afraid that this truth might ruin the slow, steady connection we were building. So I kept silent, letting the warmth linger, letting my emotions settle like the soft patter of rain outside. For the first time, I understood that love didn't always announce itself with fireworks. Sometimes it crept in quietly, in a glance, in a touch, in shared silence. And I knew that whatever this was, it was growing inside me, and I wasn't ready to stop it. It happened by accident. Or at least, that's what I told myself. I was pouring tea for the both of us, and our fingers brushed. A spark ran straight to my chest, sharp, undeniable. I froze, gripping the kettle tighter than necessary, aware that my pulse had spiked. She didn't move away. Instead, she met my gaze calmly, as if testing me, daring me to acknowledge the electricity between us. I wanted to pull back, retreat into safety, remind myself this was only temporary, but I couldn't. My hand lingered, hovering near hers, caught in a moment that seemed to stretch on endlessly. Her eyes softened, a subtle smile forming, gentle but knowing. That smile spoke volumes. She had felt it too. She had felt it and didn't flinch. For the first time, I allowed myself to notice everything about her. The warmth of her skin, the way her fingers moved when relaxed, the slight tilt of her head that gave her an unspoken confidence. It was intoxicating and terrifying. Because this was not part of the plan. This wasn't supposed to happen. Later, as I walked past her in the hallway, our shoulders brushed. It was slight, almost imperceptible, yet my body reacted as though it were an earthquake. She didn't pull away. She just let the contact linger for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. I wanted to linger, to hold her close, but I stepped away, pretending to adjust a picture frame. I couldn't deny it any longer. Something was growing between us. Attention, yes, but also a quiet affection that simmered in every accidental touch. I found myself thinking about her constantly, her quiet laughter in the kitchen, the soft scent she left lingering in the air, the way she moved through the apartment like it was hers alone. And the more I tried to ignore it, the more impossible it became. One night I caught myself replaying that first touch over and over in my mind, tracing the warmth of her hand, imagining what it would feel like to hold her again, properly, intentionally. My chest tightened with desire I didn't dare name aloud. Yet every time I imagined it, I felt both fear and longing. Fear of crossing a line, longing for a closeness I didn't know how to ask for. By the time I went to bed that night, I realized the truth. The plan had failed. I hadn't married her for love, for companionship, or even for rebellion anymore. I had married her and found something far more dangerous, an emotional connection I couldn't ignore, no matter how much I wanted to pretend it was temporary. And in that realization, I felt a strange mixture of dread and anticipation. Rain pattered softly against the windows, filling the apartment with a quiet rhythm that matched the thrum in my chest. I couldn't stop thinking about her, about the way her hand had lingered against mine, the faint scent of her perfume in the air, the quiet confidence in her voice. I had tried to ignore it, tried to tell myself this was just part of the plan, that I was simply rebelling against my father. But it wasn't. It had never been that simple. I found myself watching her from across the room, noticing the subtle movements I'd missed before, the way her shoulders relaxed when she hummed to herself, the tiny crease that appeared between her eyebrows when she focused on something, the curve of her lips when she smiled without realizing it. And I realized I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't act as though she were simply part of a temporary arrangement. The words had been building in me for days, hesitant, awkward, ready to betray me at any moment. I didn't want to scare her. I didn't want to ruin what had grown between us, delicate and tentative though it was. But the silence was becoming unbearable. I had to say something, even if it scared me more than anything else ever could. I don't know what this is, I whispered, almost afraid to let the sound leave my lips. But I can't stop thinking about you. Her eyes met mine slowly, calmly. No surprise. No judgment. Just patience and understanding, and a softness I hadn't allowed myself to hope for. She didn't respond immediately, and I felt the weight of my own confession hanging in the room like mist. I could feel my pulse in my temples, my hands trembling slightly as I reached for her, not recklessly, not demanding, just seeking connection. Her fingers brushed against mine, delicate and deliberate. That touch said everything. It was not just reassurance, it was acknowledgement. She had been feeling it too, this pull between us that had been simmering quietly under the surface. My chest tightened, my breath caught, and for the first time, I didn't want to run from the truth. I didn't want to hide from what I felt. We sat there for a long while, our hands close but not fully entwined, the room filled with a calm intimacy that was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. I wanted to tell her everything, to spill the words I had been holding back, but the fear lingered. Fear that this fragile moment could shatter if I rushed it. And yet, just as I felt the walls around me cracking, I realized something. I didn't care. I didn't care about my father's expectations, about appearances, about anything outside this room. The truth was simple, terrifying, and undeniable. I wanted her, not just for rebellion, not just for companionship, but because she had captured a part of me I didn't even know existed. That night, as the rain continued to fall, I finally let myself admit it, to her, to myself, to the quiet apartment that had become our sanctuary. This was no longer a marriage of convenience. This was real. And it scared me more than anything I had ever faced. Weeks passed, and the tension that had simmered between us finally began to settle into a steady rhythm, a quiet intimacy that felt natural and alive. We moved through the apartment together, cooking, laughing at small mishaps, sharing stories about our days. Each glance, each accidental touch, each lingering smile built an unspoken connection, a bridge between the life I had run from and the one I was starting to embrace. One evening, I found myself standing behind her as she stirred something on the stove, the warmth from the pan mixing with the warmth of her presence. I wanted to reach out, to brush a stray strand of hair from her face, but I paused, savoring the moment. When she turned and caught my gaze, there was a softness there, a quiet acceptance, and I realized I didn't have to act. She already knew. Our hands brushed again, slightly longer this time, and I felt the pull in my chest, the pull that had been building for weeks. I leaned closer, slowly, deliberately, until our shoulders touched. She didn't flinch. Instead, she smiled. The kind of smile that let me know she had been waiting for this too. We spent hours talking that night, not about plans or obligations, but about ourselves, about what we wanted, what we feared, what we had learned. Her voice was calm, warm, soothing, and I felt every word sink deep into me, grounding me in ways I hadn't known I needed. I realized that she was no longer just part of my life. She had become essential to it. There were moments of silence too, comfortable silences where our hands would meet, fingers entwining almost without thought. I felt the tension between us dissolve into something stronger, something steady and real. For the first time in my life, I wasn't running from my father's control, from my past, from my own fears. I was present, fully, completely, with her. The final confirmation came in the quiet of the living room, late at night. I reached for her hand, and this time I didn't hesitate. She met me halfway, our fingers interlacing naturally. The warmth that spread through me was unlike anything I had ever felt. Comforting, exhilarating, grounding. And when I looked into her eyes, I knew the truth. I hadn't just married to spite my father. I had married and discovered love, genuine and profound, in the most unexpected place. I rested my forehead against hers, our breaths mingling, our hands still entwined. No words were needed. In the room, the apartment, the life we had created. It all felt right. This was home, not just because of a roof or furniture, but because of her. And in that quiet, intimate moment, I finally understood that sometimes the most rebellious acts lead to the most real, the most life-changing, the most beautiful outcomes. I had married to defy, but I stayed because I had found something I could not leave behind. We had crossed the threshold from obligation to connection, from indifference to love. And as I held her hand, feeling her warmth and steady presence, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I didn't just want her, I needed her.